Hello, day one of Staple.
Yeah!
Hey! The energy I was hoping for. Good afternoon. My name is Richard Whittaker. I'm with the Austin Chronicle, and welcome to this afternoon's panel, Making and Marketing Webcomics. And we've got 4 people on here who know a lot about both, hopefully, otherwise this is going to be a very weird hour. Just going to start off at this end with Kennon James, and if you could introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
My name is Kennon James. I'm an illustrator, cartoonist. I live in the Austin area, and I do a webcomic called Mohagen, which is about a goldfish and his skull buddy, and yeah, that's about it.
Your turn. My name is Jason Poland. I'm from Houston, Texas, and I draw Robbie and Bobby. It's a webcomic about a robot and his boy and their friends. And I started it in college in 2003. And here I am, still doing it.
Cool. I go by Jeremy the Artist. I do a site called mytalkinghead.com. It has a few different characters, including Bubby, the smoking baby on the toilet, and Carl, the angry koala that beats up things. So.
Hi, I'm Monica Gallagher, and I have 2 webcomics that I've been working on for probably, one of them's over 10 years now. One is about a college girl and Greek gods infiltrating her life and kind of making it miserable. And another one is about a roller girl at her day job. And there's also a werewolf in it, because I like werewolves.
So let's start off with the obvious question. Why webcomics? What was it that got you into that as a medium and a way of telling stories in the first place?
Are we going to just go down the line, or are we just piping in
Let's
one? Okay.
Start with you now. Let's start at the other end now.
Oh, okay. Well, I first started because I've been doing this since 2000. I put my first comic, Gods and Undergods, online just because that's what I saw people were doing with Scott McCloud and Jason Little, and that was kind of like back in the old days of webcomics. So that's just what I thought you were supposed to do. And it's turned out to be just a really great medium for getting your work out there and getting people comfortable with your stuff on a regular basis and giving you an opportunity to practice storytelling in that format. So.
I started doing webcomics because I'm pretty poor, and I couldn't do print comics. I thought, I've been hearing from other artists, getting recommendations from the guys that made it, that you have to do runs of 1,000, 2,000, and webcomics, the accessibility of the internet, especially now. I've only been in it for 2.5, 3 years. It's anybody can go on the internet and look at your site if you promote it the right way. So.
I got into it just because when you put your website online, you don't get a rejection letter for doing that. So, and I've had a lot of fun with animated GIFs and kind of infinite scroll, sort of those Scott McCloud sort of things that are exciting, and your options just really open up when you're on the web.
I actually started my webcomic about 5 years ago with a buddy, and after about a year he realized it was way too much work, so he quit. So I had to go and get a new writer, but mainly we just had some jokes we wanted to have a format for, and it was relatively cheap, and yeah, so that was about it.
Obviously, it's a lot easier than going and finding a printer to try and produce a run or try and get syndicated by somebody, but then there's that initial problem of getting known. And I think that's the big issue, because there's so much out there these days. And even when you started, there still wasn't, there was still enough out there and it was even harder in a lot of ways to publicize your material. So I was wondering, how you guys went about going, okay, I want to tell these stories, but there's no point if I don't have an audience. And how you built that audience up, and any particular war stories you've got about that. Let's start with you, Jason.
Oh, okay.
Make the pain fair.
Okay. So I had been doing this in college, and once I started wanting to do it online, I started from scratch basically, and so I wanted people to come to the site because I had so much archives. But really, I've been learning that you just have to put it where everyone can read it. You may lose ad revenue if you put your ad on your comic on Facebook, but they're not really going to come to the site and read more.
We all have our different comics, and to get out there, especially now with social networking, it's important to share this other person's, you share with your friends, you like a lot, and he shares yours, because this whole cross-platform, cross-networking is the best way to get out there, especially now since like print newspapers and comics are going down and the digital age is upon us. You know, we've been in the digital age for the last few years, so I think that's really important to do now.
I mean, all this stuff is so accessible to everyone that there's no such thing as just a pure reader or a pure consumer. Like, everyone that reads your comic or is even going to be interested in your comic is probably a cartoonist themselves or an artist or someone who wants to start it. So, I mean, you kind of have to remember what it's like to be a fan while you're creating. You can't forget that. And then otherwise you're just like, you don't even enjoy reading comics anymore. You just like criticize. I mean, sometimes that happens for me when you get too bogged down, but yeah.
And speaking of the digital age, I have a writer that I've been working with for 4 years that I've never met in person.
You guys should get put together for like a coffee or something.
We probably wouldn't even like each other.
Yeah,
We don't want to screw it up. So we've only talked on the phone twice.
Oh wow.
So.
Does he have like a weird voice or something? Or is he...
No, I mean we don't want to screw anything up. So he stays in Minnesota and I stay in Texas.
Town's not big enough for the both of you.
Yeah.
You know what's weird about that is like I have like some Facebook friends and like we've been friends like from different countries and what have you, different artists and what have you. And I recently discovered on Facebook through the phone at least you can do where you leave a voicemail type thing in the messages versus like typing out. So like one friend I had been friends with for like a year, I was like, I want to try this out. I'm like, hey, this is Jeremy, you know, and like they replied back and I was like, oh, I never pictured the voice like that. And it wasn't like, it kind of like brought down the
it's like online dating.
Yeah. Yeah, it was this girl.
Not that I've ever done that.
It was this girl, her name was Janie, and she's like, hi Jeremy, you know, all this thing. It's interesting.
So one of the things we touched on briefly was this you know, in the process of creating a strip, and particularly now that there are so many different social media networks, you know, with different demands, how do you approach actually just coming up with the right image and the right strip and the right and you know, GIF versus JPEG and those kind of issues of actually just coming up with something that is going to translate across and work in all formats and not end up pixelated to hell or just a super huge image, and that seems like a really core issue in what you guys are doing.
Interesting.
I have like a friend of mine that does my hosting on my site, and he always rags on me when my image is like over 300K or something. He's like, it's going to slow the site down. And so I do like 72 DPI, 900 pixels, and there's lossless compression programs that can kind of condense it down without, you know, losing the color quality and things like that. So usually I can get a decent comic I like of, you know, about 200K, and that's good. I mean, good for Tumblr and Twitter and things like that.
I usually work like I think like 900 is like standard, maybe that medium, you know, in pixel size. But I always like create my comics 1500, 1600 by 1600, whatever, like in larger formats, and then for the web I'll reduce it to scale it to 900 by whatever, and for me that works. And I have a graphic design background, and one of the things is like you don't use JPEGs. Like JPEGs, every time you open up a JPEG.
I do.
Oh, well, you always use JPEGs. Nice. Yeah, well, with JPEGs, every time you open a JPEG, they slightly pixelate more, not to your eye, but if you open it up maybe like 500 times. So, in other words, for archiving, JPEGs are not the best to use. You use WebGIFs or PNGs, because PNGs and GIFs, just like PDFs, don't deteriorate over time or pixelate. So, like for me, when I do my webcomics, they're all saved into a PNG format and also into the Photoshop file that I have, so I can have something to go back onto.
Yeah, definitely. If you're making web comics or comics for whatever output, definitely make them bigger and scan them in at, you know, at least 300 DPI when you're working on them. And then whenever you put them to the web, do 72 DPI, but keep those high quality ones, because you might want to print it out. You might want to do a poster, and otherwise you'll shoot yourself in the foot.
So the worst thing is having to redraw something you drew.
Yes.
Part of building a community around an artist and around their work is about building one around the artist, and you know, the willingness to be a bit of a self-publicist, which is for a lot. I've known a lot of artists that is the tough bit. There's others who are just like, great, I get to be outside of my studio for 5 minutes and see daylight and people, and they just relish it. But others, it's like, you know, that can be the tough bit. And I was just wondering, like, for each of you, how that has been of being, okay, well, people have to associate me with my art. It's not just the strip. I'm not Bert Breathe sat in the middle of Arizona refusing to talk to people for 20 years. You know, that you've got to publicize who you are as well and kind of put yourselves a little bit out there.
So only recently have I, my computer's in my living room, and in the last 3 months have I actually turned on the living room light, because for a long time I was sitting in the corner with all the lights off with only the computer screen light glowing on me. And after a while of doing this, I realized this is probably not healthy. So I turn on the lights and I feel a little better, and I opened up the blinds so I can see people and they can see me kind of. But you know,
people come by and look through the window while you're working.
I wish they. No, I really don't wish they. I work in my boxer sometimes, so
I've noticed all my friends on all my artist friends on Facebook are the most prolific, because they basically are working alone on their computer, and so they're updating like 10 times a day. Just, hey
world, how you doing?
Here's my cat. You know.
Hashtag cat.
Yeah.
I guess like just constantly creating work. I think I mean, if you do follow a lot of cartoonists, it's really hard to keep up with what they're doing all the time. But if you just see them, you may miss a strip here or there. But if they're pretty regular about it, you're like, I feel it's kind of like, if I miss a day, like sometimes I don't even want to get online at all. Like I'm like, I missed a day at work, like or something, you know. Like so when I do a comic, I feel like I get to clock in and like talk to my other cartoonist friends on Twitter. Like it's like a big studio or something. And so I kind of like that, and then it gets me kind of excited because I do it in the morning, so I still have to go to work that day, like my day job. And so, but it's okay because I got it out of the way, and like whatever happens during the day, I at least did a comic, and so that's the kind of thing.
But you're getting out of the house.
Oh yeah, that's true. Get a little vitamin D.
I think it's important to go out like. A while, like I'm still very much introverted, but I've learned in the last few years as part of the survival of the business is you have to be out there. You have to, say hi and promote your work and hand out the comics and whatnot. I would 24/7 prefer just to be in a closed up, like I said, darkly lit room and just draw all the time. But if I really want to get my work out there and make a profit off of it somehow, then I have to do this. I also do. I'm a caricaturist. I'm a freelance illustrator and a graphic designer, so like a lot of times I'll go across town, I'll do a caricature, but I'll bring my business cards, and on my business cards I have my webcomic site and my portfolio site. So while I'm doing my caricatures, like, hey, you should check this out, and all the art stuff that I do, I make sure that it branches out, but it comes back to me and shows my main interest, I guess. So.
I think as hard as it is to go and show your own work, and it is really difficult because you're putting so much time and effort into something, and then to even show it to someone and then have them critique you sometimes right to your face is really difficult. But I think it's really important, especially when you're starting out. You need that feedback, and you need to get used to that. And then there's like a couple of different ways you can deal with that. If you want to kind of pretend that your work is separate from you and it's not really attached to you, I found that's helpful when you're trying to market it, so that you don't take everything really personally, because people might hate it, and they might tell you that they hate it.
Yeah, it's just good to just make friends in the community, like you said. I mean, I've gotten more activity from just being friends with other artists. I use Facebook a lot, but and I'll experiment. I'll stop posting for a while just to see what my numbers do, and so it's still a big experiment. It feels like.
Well, I feel like we're still like early on. Like we're not even in the middle end of it. Like the digital revolution has happened, and we're in the beginning, and we're figuring it out. And I feel like we're there. Like little things like the crowdsourcing is amazing. Like that's an amazing thing, and I feel like it's going to grow. But we're still 2 steps behind where we need to be. Like we're getting there. And so it's like you said, it's experimenting. Even like social networking, like the trends, like it's been changing, and who knows where it's going to go now? Like,
Snapchat comics.
Yeah,
Snapchat comics. That sounds amazing. 1 panel, right?
Yeah.
5 panels.
Can you get 10 seconds to read it?
I have a question kind of about story. So like when you get your idea, how long do you generally like plan it out, plot it out, world build before you even start your first strip of it? Like, do you guys do that even, or do you just kind of do it go along, or I don't know?
That's a good question.
I kind of like dived headfirst into it. Well, let me say, so I was an editorial cartoonist, and that's 1 panel, right? 1 panel, 1 panel. And then one day, I did that for like 3.5 years, and one day the editor was like, we have you know, this filler space. Do you want to do a comic? And I got super excited, and I spent like 3 days trying to come up with a story. And you know, I did that first comic, but then they're like, oh, we like it. We want to do it weekly and then like I started getting it down, and like I would plan it like a week ahead, you know, and that was with that comic. But then I created my own site, and it was kind of like, well, the cartoon I did for college was this, it was Chupi, the Chupacabra college student, and he lived with a goat, and so the goat would always like almost get eaten by a Chupi. It was like the whole Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner thing, and so it was a gag, but it was college. And he was a college student, but when I got out of college, I was like, man, I can't really like the reality of that was gone, and the story for that was kind of gone, so I had to change it, and so I came up with these other characters, and sometimes I dive head first, and like when I did my first when I started the site, I just started like spitting out cartoons, like whatever the random idea of the day was. But then I found out, okay, it's better if you have a character. And what does this character do? And you start coming up with you start developing it like a real person, at least for me. And you start coming with a backstory, the emotions, what motivates, and that helps like fuel other stories. To come up with like an end goal, kind of.
Yeah, it depends on the story you want to do. If you want to do kind of an ongoing story, or if you want gag strips. I did one story where I knew I wanted it to go on for a long time, and I would kind of plan out. There was only so much I could plan ahead of time, and the rest just happened as I was drawing it. But then for the other one, I wanted some of it to be to have story arcs, and some of it to just be like, you know, a one shot. Mm-hmm. And that kind of gives you a break if you're getting bogged down with like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, you know, next in the story. Then just do a fun like one shot, so you don't have to think about it, and help keep yourself going.
From the marketing aspect, the one shots are amazing because you can go, oh, this is a one shot, and this is the amazing story of this, and this is the only thing you ever get of this, and then kind of find yourself throughout the different comics you do.
Yeah, we go back and forth. We do gag strip mostly, but my writer will sometimes let me know, like, hey, I'm about to start a thread. This is what I have in mind, and he doesn't like tell me how long it's going to last, and I don't need to know, but he usually just lets me know. So the updates are, so we keep people involved in the story arc. For instance, Mohagan's the name of my goldfish, and we have this imaginary, I mean, he looks out of his tank into his owner's room, who's a 10-year-old boy, and so we make jokes based on what he's seeing outside the tank. So we don't ever have to show that world. He's just commenting on it because the kid's doing this. Well, my writer just contacted me last week and said, okay, and Jeremy's the kid. He said, Jeremy's mom's going to get pregnant, so we're about to go on an arc on that, because he and I both became new dads of the last year. So I'm like, okay, so here comes these jokes. But he usually just lets me know before we get into that. But usually it's one off, or if something funny will happen, I'll text him and say, hey, we need a, you know, whatever joke, and he'll say, okay, yeah, we'll do that tomorrow, and he'll bust one out real quick. So.
I love your relationship with your writer. It's like almost you guys are like sliding envelopes under the door and never really
it's
interacting.
Totally like that. It's totally like that. I mean, it literally is like that. I mean, we text 99% of the time. So
can we do a GoFundMe so you guys can meet each other like in the middle? That'd be amazing. I don't know. That's pretty cool, that relationship that you have.
I mean, he's great. I mean, I'm fortunate to have found him. Like I said, I started the strip with another buddy, and we had worked together at an animation studio for about 10 years, and we always wanted to find a personal project to work on. And then we found this. We started this. And after a year, he just wasn't feeling it. He was just like, all right, I'm done. And I told him, I said, well, I'm going to keep going. Mm-hmm. He said, oh, that's fine. And I found this other writer just on LiveJournal. He wound up buying a piece of art from me randomly. Like he saw something I did, and he bought it online. And then we just started a conversation. And then I read his LiveJournal and realized he was hilarious, so I just said, hey, oops. Yep. I said, is this something you've been interested in? He said, oh, yeah, so, yeah.
So how did that work out? Was there like an initial trust issues, or you just kind of like went with the flow and like, you know, like say like you were supposed to do it by a certain day and then you waited for that certain day? I mean, was there any like checklists? Do you feel I imagine now you feel like more relaxed and comfortable with him, but.
Well, I brought it up to him. I said, hey, and he's super prolific. I mean, he's got a hardcore day job too. I mean, he writes under a pen name because of, I didn't say that, but so yeah, and when I told him about it, I asked him if he was interested. He immediately busted out 10 strips. And I was like, okay, this is the guy I want right here. Because he's always, and we have a Dropbox, and he is always 10 to 20 strips in front of me usually. So I'm not hurting for material. When I start getting caught up to him, I start getting worried. I'm like, hey, you're not quitting, are you? And he's like, oh, no, I'll drop in 5 tonight. And so he's always.
Okay, we've got time for one last question. So who's most enthusiastic? You. Make it good or somebody else gets it, okay?
For those of y'all that have writers, do y'all take direction from the writers as far as like what y'all put in y'all's panels and everything? Like, how do y'all work that stuff out?
Who's writers here? Am I the only one with a writer?
They just say this is
I've worked with a
dialogue,
writer
this
before,
is
but
the
only on
setting.
one book, so.
He takes more direction from me than I take from him. Usually he kind of leaves it up to me because I'm doing the final piece. So he'll write something and I'll text him back and just say, hey, you used too many words. You're crowding me out here. And he'll say, okay, I'll rewrite it. And so he takes more direction from me than I do with him, mainly because I'm doing the finished piece. So.
I had one. I did work with a writer early on a strip for a couple months, and it was my first experiment as far as like collabing, and like it was one of those things I worried about too, because he gave me the writing, and of course I was like, okay, I'll give you some notes on what I think and what have you, and then I sent him the drafts. I'm like, oh God, he's gonna give me notes too, and like it's one of those things that you form a relationship, and that's how you have to think about it, like. It's you're both like creatives, and you both have this picture of it, and you have to kind of meet in the middle. It's a compromise to some extent. If you guys can like come up with the same idea, exactly, that's beautiful, but it never really happens. So it's something you work at, I think.
I think my wife's written maybe a quarter of my comics actually. But, I'm like, oh, what's this? Do you think this is funny? She's like, no, do this. So like, actually, yeah, you're right. Like she's a couple of my characters are like her creation. Like Miss Bluestocking is she's a little basically my wife July, and she's like serried a lot, and so yeah. I mean, she's actually given me one now. Like we were like on the way to work, and she came up with this idea, and every day it's like. Did you draw it yet? Did you try it yet? I'm like, I gotta do this thing. So I think it's gonna be good though. It's just like a little 4-panel fun thing. So that's nice.
Okay, well, I think that's all we've got time for. I'd like to thank Kennon, Jeremy, Jason, and Monica so much for being here today, and thank you all for coming out. Round of applause for everybody, please. They'll all be here all weekend. Buy their stuff, visit their websites, donate whatever you can, and I'll be back at 3 o'clock with Chip Zdarsky. So if you're interested in talking about this year's surprise breakout titles, Sex Criminals,
Shit, we should
I'll see you then.
Next time, we'll talk like gin and tonics and stuff.